Why willpower always loses. Most people believe their biggest problem is motivation. They think they wake up unmotivated, they assume they lack discipline, they tell themselves they are lazy, inconsistent, or broken in some invisible way. This belief feels personal, heavy, and shameful. And it is completely wrong. Motivation is not the root problem. It never was. If motivation were the deciding factor, then people would only fail sometimes. Instead, most people fail predictably, repeatedly, and in the same patterns. They start strong. They feel inspired. They commit emotionally. And then, slowly, silently, they return to exactly where they started. Not because they stopped caring, but because their surroundings never stopped controlling them. Willpower feels powerful in theory, but it collapses in real life. It collapses because it is not designed to operate alone. It was never meant to fight against constant temptation, noise, convenience, and distraction. The human brain did not evolve to resist environments. It evolved to respond to them. Every action you take is shaped by what is around you. What you see. What you hear. What is within reach. What is easy. What is familiar. These things guide behavior long before conscious thought appears. You do not decide most of your actions. You react to the setup you are placed inside. This is why willpower fails even when intentions are strong. The environment speaks louder than intention. Always. People like to believe that success is about strength. They admire discipline. They glorify self-control. But discipline is often an illusion. What looks like strength is usually structure. What looks like self-control is usually environment doing the work silently in the background. The person who eats clean effortlessly is not battling cravings every day. Their environment does not constantly invite them to fail. The person who works deeply is not heroic. Their environment removes distractions before they appear. The person who is consistent is not special. They are supported. Willpower is a temporary force. It spikes when emotions are high. It fades when life becomes normal again. Environment does not spike or fade. It remains. It repeats. It reinforces. This is why relying on motivation is dangerous. Motivation is emotional energy. Emotional energy is unstable. It depends on sleep, stress, mood, confidence, and external validation. When any of those shift, motivation weakens. Environment does not care how you feel. It continues to shape behavior regardless of emotion. People often confuse early success with lasting change. They feel motivated in the beginning, so they assume they have changed. But what they are experiencing is not change. It is momentum. Momentum runs out when the environment remains unchanged. The moment motivation fades, the environment takes over again. And the environment always wins. This is not a failure of character. It is a failure of design. Humans are pattern-following organisms. We repeat what is easy, visible, and familiar. We avoid what is difficult, hidden, and inconvenient. This is not weakness. It is efficiency. The brain seeks the path of least resistance because resistance costs energy. Energy is survival. When your environment makes bad habits easier than good ones, bad habits become default behavior. No amount of motivation can override this indefinitely. You can fight the environment for a day. Maybe a week. Eventually, fatigue wins. This is why people feel exhausted by self-improvement. They are fighting their surroundings every single day. They are asking willpower to do the job of design. And willpower is not built for that role. Consider how many decisions you make daily. What to eat. What to focus on. When to stop. When to continue. Each decision drains cognitive energy. When the environment forces constant decision-making, willpower depletes faster. This leads to relapse, not because the person stopped caring, but because they ran out of resistance. Environment removes decisions. And when decisions are removed, consistency emerges naturally. This is why the same person can be disciplined in one area of life and chaotic in another. It is not because their personality changes. It is because the environment changes. In one context, behavior is supported. In another, it is sabotaged. People blame themselves when they should be studying their surroundings. Every environment contains cues. These cues act as silent triggers. They tell the brain what behavior is expected. A phone on the desk suggests distraction. A bed in sight suggests rest. Food in reach suggests eating. Noise suggests interruption. These cues do not ask permission. They do not negotiate. They simply activate behavior. Most people are unaware of how deeply they are influenced by these signals. They believe they are choosing freely, when in reality, they are responding automatically. The environment has already decided before the mind catches up. This is why habits feel automatic. Because they are. When someone says they cannot stop scrolling, they are not weak. Their environment is engineered to pull attention. When someone says they cannot focus, they are not broken. Their surroundings are hostile to focus. The tragedy is that people internalize this failure. They turn environmental problems into identity problems. They tell themselves they are inconsistent, undisciplined, incapable. This creates guilt, which drains even more energy, which makes change even harder. The environment remains untouched. The cycle continues. Trying harder is not the solution. Effort is not the missing piece. Design is. Until the environment changes, behavior remains fragile. Until the setup changes, progress remains temporary. Until the surroundings support the goal, willpower will always be required, and willpower will always fail. This is not pessimistic. It is realistic. Understanding this shifts responsibility in a powerful way. It removes blame and replaces it with control. Instead of asking why you are weak, you ask why the environment is misaligned. This question leads to solutions instead of shame. Most people never ask this question. They live inside environments created by habit, accident, and convenience. They accept these environments as neutral. They are not neutral. They are instructions. The environment is constantly training you, either toward growth or toward stagnation. And training happens whether you agree or not. This is why lasting change feels rare. It is rare because most people never change the system they live inside. They only change their intentions. Intentions without structure collapse. The uncomfortable truth is that if your environment stays the same, your future behavior is already decided. Motivation will rise and fall, but outcomes will remain predictable. That predictability is not fate. It is design repeating itself. Change does not begin with more effort. It begins with awareness. Awareness of how deeply surroundings shape behavior. Awareness that willpower is not enough. Awareness that environment is not background. It is the main force. Once this is understood, the focus shifts. From trying harder to designing smarter. From blaming self to redesigning space. From emotional struggle to structural advantage. This insight does not feel comforting. It removes excuses. It removes the fantasy that one day motivation will save you. It forces responsibility at a deeper level. But it also offers something rare. Control. Not control over emotions. Not control over motivation. Control over the system that determines behavior. And systems, unlike emotions, can be changed. Willpower is often described as strength, but in reality it behaves more like fuel. It is consumed every time you resist something, decide something, or override an impulse. Each small act of resistance takes a little more from the same limited reserve. By the end of the day, that reserve is depleted, and behavior reverts to default patterns. This is why people make strong decisions in the morning and weak ones at night. It is not because values change. It is because energy does. The environment does not drain. It does not get tired. It does not need encouragement. It applies pressure consistently, without pause, without emotion. When willpower and environment collide, environment always has the advantage because it never stops. People underestimate how often they are resisting. Every notification ignored, every craving denied, every distraction avoided costs something. Over time, these costs accumulate. Eventually, the brain seeks relief. Relief usually looks like the behavior the environment has made easiest. This is where most habits collapse. Not in moments of weakness, but in moments of exhaustion. When someone says they had a bad day and gave in, what they are really describing is a system that demanded constant resistance. The environment forced too many decisions. Willpower ran out. The system reclaimed control. This is why strategies based on self-control feel impressive but rarely last. They assume that resistance can be sustained indefinitely. It cannot. Biology does not support that assumption. The brain is designed to automate frequently repeated actions. Automation conserves energy. When an action becomes habitual, it no longer requires conscious effort. The brain prefers this state. It seeks it actively. The environment determines which actions get automated. If the environment repeatedly presents the same cues, the brain links those cues to behaviors. Over time, behavior becomes automatic. This is how habits form. Not through force, but through repetition supported by context. Trying to override this process with willpower is like swimming upstream against a current that never weakens. You may make progress briefly, but exhaustion is inevitable. People often misinterpret failure as proof that they lack discipline. In reality, failure is feedback. It shows that the environment is stronger than intention. Instead of responding by trying harder, most people respond by judging themselves. This response changes nothing. Judgment does not alter surroundings. Shame does not redesign systems. Guilt does not remove triggers. Only structural change does. Another reason willpower fails is that it requires constant attention. You must remember your goals. You must remind yourself to resist. You must actively intervene. Attention is fragile. It is easily disrupted. The moment attention slips, the environment takes over again. This is why habits break during travel, stress, or routine changes. The environment shifts, attention is divided, and the old system reasserts itself. People assume that success means being vigilant forever. That belief leads to burnout. True success reduces the need for vigilance. It removes the need to constantly monitor behavior. Environment does this quietly. When the environment aligns with the desired behavior, effort disappears. Action becomes the path of least resistance. The brain follows it without conflict. This is why some people appear disciplined without struggle. They are not resisting. They are responding to well-designed surroundings. Their environment has been shaped to support their goals. The illusion of willpower keeps people trapped. It convinces them that failure is personal. It prevents them from questioning the system around them. As long as the problem is framed as a lack of motivation, the solution remains emotional. Emotional solutions are unstable. The moment the problem is reframed as environmental, solutions become practical. Practical solutions endure. This reframing removes self-blame and replaces it with strategy. It shifts focus from inner strength to outer structure. From effort to design. Most people never make this shift. They spend years trying to strengthen willpower instead of reducing the need for it. They fight symptoms instead of causes. Willpower is not the enemy. It is simply misused. It works best as a short-term bridge, not a permanent foundation. It can initiate change, but it cannot sustain it alone. Environment sustains. Understanding this explains why repeated attempts fail in the same way. The same surroundings produce the same outcomes. Motivation rises, then falls. Behavior follows the same curve. Without environmental change, the cycle repeats indefinitely. This is not because people refuse to change. It is because the system they live in has not changed. Once this is understood, the obsession with motivation begins to fade. The focus shifts to design. To setup. To removing friction. To altering defaults. This shift feels subtle, but it changes everything. When the environment is redesigned, willpower becomes a backup, not a crutch. It is used sparingly, not constantly. It supports change instead of carrying it. This is the difference between fragile habits and stable ones. Fragile habits depend on emotion. Stable habits depend on structure. Most people live fragile systems and then blame themselves when they break. They are not broken. The system is. The most deceptive environments are not chaotic ones. They are familiar ones. Familiar environments feel safe, predictable, and comfortable. They rarely trigger alarm. But familiarity is exactly what allows old behavior to survive unnoticed. The environment keeps whispering the same instructions, day after day, until those instructions become invisible. This is why change feels hardest in places you know well. The brain associates locations with behaviors. Rooms remember patterns. Desks remember habits. Screens remember routines. Even when intention changes, the environment quietly recalls the old script. People believe that determination should override this memory. It does not. The environment cues behavior before thought appears. By the time you notice what is happening, the action has already begun. This is why relapse feels automatic. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Automatic. When someone returns to an old place and suddenly slips back into old habits, they assume something went wrong inside them. Nothing went wrong. The environment simply resumed its role. It delivered the same cues. The brain responded in the same way. Until those cues are altered, behavior will continue to repeat. This is the part most people resist. Changing environment feels inconvenient. It feels unnecessary. It feels extreme. People prefer to believe they can succeed without rearranging their world. They want change without disruption. But disruption is the price of redesign. If the environment remains unchanged, it continues to reward old behavior and punish new behavior. New habits feel effortful because they are unsupported. Old habits feel natural because they are reinforced. This creates an illusion that change is hard. In reality, change is unsupported. The brain always follows the strongest signal. When old cues remain visible and accessible, they overpower intention. This is not a moral failure. It is a sensory one. What you see, you act on. What you hear, you respond to. What is close, you choose. What is distant, you ignore. These principles operate continuously. They do not care about goals. They do not respect motivation. They only respond to proximity, visibility, and ease. People underestimate how small environmental changes can be. They imagine massive redesigns, radical life changes, dramatic resets. In truth, behavior shifts when friction shifts. And friction can be altered quietly. A small barrier can stop a habit. A small convenience can start one. This is why willpower-based change feels dramatic and exhausting, while environment-based change feels boring and sustainable. There is no internal battle. There is no emotional strain. The environment does the work silently. The hardest part is not execution. It is acceptance. Accepting that self-control is not the main driver of behavior. Accepting that surroundings shape outcomes more than intention. Accepting that success is less heroic and more architectural. Once this acceptance occurs, the focus changes. You stop asking how to become stronger. You start asking how to become supported. This shift removes shame. It replaces it with responsibility of a different kind. Not responsibility to force yourself, but responsibility to design your life intentionally. Design requires awareness. Awareness of what currently exists. Awareness of what cues are present. Awareness of what behaviors are being invited. Most people never look this closely. They live inside inherited environments. Environments shaped by convenience, habit, and past choices. These environments continue to shape future behavior unless interrupted. Interrupting them feels uncomfortable because it breaks routine. But routine is exactly what keeps behavior locked. This is why real change often begins with discomfort. Not because change itself is painful, but because the environment must be disturbed. The old structure must be weakened before a new one can take hold. People who succeed long-term are not those who try harder. They are those who redesign earlier. They remove temptation before it requires resistance. They add support before motivation is needed. They do not trust willpower. They do not depend on mood. They rely on setup. This makes their progress appear effortless. Others mistake this for talent or discipline. It is neither. It is foresight. The environment is always teaching. It teaches you what matters by what it highlights. It teaches you what is acceptable by what it allows. It teaches you what is easy by what it removes friction from. If you do not choose these lessons consciously, they will be chosen for you. This is why lasting change begins not with a promise, but with a redesign. Not with a declaration, but with an adjustment. Not with motivation, but with environment. Until this happens, willpower will continue to fight a losing battle. And the outcome will remain predictable. Understanding this does not guarantee change. But ignoring it guarantees repetition. And repetition without redesign always leads back to the same place. How environment quietly controls you. Most people believe they are making conscious choices throughout the day. They believe their actions are the result of decisions, intentions, and values. This belief feels empowering. It also hides the truth. Behavior begins before choice. Long before you decide what to do, the environment has already narrowed your options. It has already highlighted one action and hidden another. It has already made one behavior convenient and another inconvenient. By the time awareness arrives, the outcome is largely determined. This is how environment controls behavior without force. It does not command. It suggests. It nudges. It repeats. Every habit begins with a cue. That cue is almost always environmental. A sound. A sight. A location. A time. A feeling triggered by context. These cues operate automatically because they are constant. The brain stops noticing them, but it never stops responding to them. This is why people say they act without thinking. They are not exaggerating. Thinking comes after the cue has already done its work. The environment does not need to be loud to be powerful. In fact, the most effective environments are subtle. They feel normal. They feel neutral. They feel invisible. And that invisibility is what makes them dangerous. When a phone sits within reach, it does not demand attention. It invites it. The invitation is quiet, but persistent. Over time, the brain learns that distraction is always available. Focus becomes fragile not because attention is weak, but because interruption is constantly offered. When food is visible, eating becomes automatic. Hunger becomes optional. The cue alone is enough to trigger behavior. The body responds before logic has a chance to intervene. When comfort is nearby, effort feels unnecessary. When effort is hidden, comfort feels inevitable. People believe they fail because they lack control. In reality, they are surrounded by cues designed to produce specific outcomes. These cues are not accidental. They are the result of convenience, design, and repetition. The brain associates cues with rewards. This association strengthens with every repetition. Eventually, the cue alone produces desire. Action follows naturally. This is how habits become self-sustaining. Not through effort, but through exposure. Most environments are not designed intentionally. They are assembled gradually. Objects accumulate. Routines solidify. Layouts remain unchanged. Over time, these elements combine into a system that quietly shapes behavior. People adapt to this system without questioning it. They assume it is neutral. It is not. Every environment rewards some behaviors and discourages others. If distraction is rewarded with stimulation, distraction grows. If focus is punished with discomfort, focus disappears. The environment does not judge. It reinforces. This reinforcement happens even when people try to resist. Resistance requires awareness. Awareness fades. The environment remains. This is why telling yourself to stop is ineffective. The cue is still present. The brain still recognizes it. The habit loop remains intact. Removing the cue breaks the loop. Resisting it does not. This is why people who succeed do not rely on reminders. They rely on removal. They eliminate triggers before they require response. The environment works like a script. When you enter a space, certain behaviors are activated automatically. A bedroom suggests rest. A kitchen suggests eating. A desk suggests work. These associations are learned through repetition. When spaces contain mixed signals, behavior becomes confused. When a bed is also a workspace, rest and focus collide. The environment sends conflicting instructions. The brain responds with inconsistency. People blame themselves for this inconsistency. They should blame the setup. Environment controls behavior by controlling cues. Cues control habits. Habits control outcomes. This chain operates continuously, regardless of belief. You can want change deeply and still fail if the environment keeps inviting the old behavior. Desire cannot compete with constant exposure. The uncomfortable truth is that most people are surrounded by environments optimized for distraction, consumption, and comfort. These environments produce predictable results. Lack of focus. Lack of consistency. Lack of progress. Trying to succeed inside an environment designed for failure requires constant resistance. Constant resistance leads to exhaustion. Exhaustion leads to relapse. This is not a flaw in character. It is a predictable response to context. Once this is understood, the focus shifts. From self-control to signal control. From inner struggle to external adjustment. From motivation to manipulation of cues. Manipulation here is not deception. It is alignment. It is choosing which behaviors are invited and which are discouraged. This is where real power begins. Not in trying harder, but in choosing what you are exposed to. The environment does not need to be perfect. It needs to be intentional. Until cues change, behavior remains the same. No matter how strong the intention feels. This is why environment is not background. It is the main character. And until it is addressed, motivation will continue to feel unreliable. Environment controls behavior not only through cues, but through friction. Friction is the silent force that decides whether an action happens or not. When friction is low, behavior flows without resistance. When friction is high, behavior fades, even if intention remains strong. Most people underestimate how sensitive behavior is to friction. They assume effort is about mindset. In reality, effort is often about setup. If a habit requires too many steps to begin, it slowly dies. If a habit requires effort to stop, it survives. This is not philosophy. It is observation. Distraction thrives because it is effortless. Focus struggles because it is demanding. Not because focus is unnatural, but because environments are designed to reduce friction for distraction and increase friction for concentration. Every extra step matters. Every delay matters. Every obstacle matters. The brain constantly scans for efficiency. It chooses the option that requires the least immediate energy. This is not laziness. It is optimization. The brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. When good behavior requires preparation, setup, or discipline, and bad behavior requires nothing, the outcome is predetermined. You can fight this for a while, but eventually, efficiency wins. This is why habits fail in moments of stress. Stress reduces tolerance for friction. Under pressure, the brain seeks relief quickly. The environment provides it. People often say they lose discipline when life gets busy. What actually happens is that friction becomes intolerable. The environment no longer supports the desired behavior, so the default behavior returns. This explains why habits that worked in calm periods collapsed during chaos. The environment did not change to accommodate pressure. It continued to demand effort when effort was unavailable. Successful systems anticipate this. They reduce friction so deeply that behavior continues even under stress. This is why high performers appear consistent during difficult times. They are not stronger. Their systems are lighter. Their environments do not demand heroism. The difference between a habit that survives stress and one that collapses is not motivation. It is friction. Most environments are friction-heavy for progress. Tools are scattered. Distractions are close. Signals are mixed. Every action requires negotiation. The brain grows tired of negotiating. When friction accumulates, avoidance follows. This is why removing small obstacles can produce disproportionate results. A slight reduction in friction can unlock consistency. A slight increase can shut it down. Environment controls friction through placement. Where things are placed determines how easily they are accessed. Access determines frequency. What is nearby becomes normal. What is distant becomes rare. People place distractions in arm's reach and productivity at a distance. Then they wonder why focus feels unnatural. Environment is not passive. It is actively shaping probability. Probability determines outcomes. When the probability of a behavior is high, it occurs often. When it is low, it fades. Environment sets probability by managing friction. This is why relying on reminders fails. Reminders increase awareness, not probability. They do not reduce friction. They do not change defaults. People confuse awareness with control. Awareness alone does not change behavior. Structure does. Another way environment controls behavior is through default choices. Humans follow defaults because defaults remove decision-making. Decision-making costs energy. When energy is low, defaults dominate. Environment defines defaults silently. If the default is distraction, distraction wins. If the default is action, action wins. Defaults operate even when people believe they are choosing freely. The brain prefers the path that requires the least explanation. This is why the most effective environments feel boring. They remove choice. They remove temptation. They remove conflict. Conflict drains energy. Environments that reduce conflict preserve energy. When energy is preserved, consistency becomes possible. People often think that freedom requires options. In behavior change, freedom comes from fewer options. Fewer options reduce friction. Reduced friction stabilizes behavior. This is why discipline feels easier in environments that appear restrictive. They eliminate alternatives. They make the desired action the obvious action. This principle applies everywhere. Work, health, learning, relationships. When the environment supports the goal feels natural. When it does not, the goal feels exhausting. Most people live in environments that constantly ask them to choose wisely. Wise choices require energy. Energy runs out. Instead of asking people to choose better, successful systems ask people to choose less. This is the hidden advantage of environment design. It removes the need for self-control. When friction is managed correctly, willpower becomes irrelevant. Behavior happens automatically, not because of strength, but because of setup. This is why environment is more powerful than intention. Intention fluctuates. Friction does not. Until friction is addressed, motivation will continue to feel unreliable. The final way environment controls behavior is through default behavior loops. These loops operate silently, without emotion or intention. Once established, they repeat themselves automatically, day after day, until something disrupts them. A default loop is not chosen. It is inherited. People wake up and follow the same sequence without thinking. They reach for the same devices. They enter the same rooms. They sit in the same positions. They follow the same micro-patterns. These patterns are reinforced by environment, not by desire. The brain loves predictability. Predictability reduces uncertainty. Reduced uncertainty conserves energy. This is why default loops feel comfortable even when they produce outcomes people dislike. Comfort does not mean satisfaction. It means familiarity. Environment reinforces familiarity relentlessly. When surroundings remain unchanged, behavior stabilizes around what is already known. This makes change feel unnatural. New habits feel foreign not because they are wrong, but because they interrupt established loops. Most people believe change requires motivation. In reality, change requires interruption. Interruption breaks loops. Environment decides whether interruption is possible. If the environment allows the loop to continue uninterrupted, behavior repeats. If the environment disrupts the loop, behavior becomes flexible. Flexibility creates opportunity for new patterns. This is why even small environmental changes can feel strangely powerful. A different route. A rearranged desk. A removed object. These changes interrupt automation. They force awareness back into the system. Awareness creates a window. That window allows choice. Without interruption, there is no window. Without a window, intention never enters. People often say they forgot their goals. They did not forget. The environment simply never reminded them. The loop continued uninterrupted. The environment determines what you remember by what it presents repeatedly. What is present becomes important. What is absent fades. This is why identity is shaped by surroundings. Repeated behavior becomes self-image. Self-image reinforces behavior. The loop deepens. Environment is the entry point into this cycle. It decides what behavior occurs often enough to become identity. This is why changing environment feels threatening. It threatens identity. It challenges familiarity. The brain resists this because familiarity equals safety. But safety and progress are not the same. Progress requires exposure to new loops. New loops require new cues. New cues require environmental change. People avoid this because it feels uncomfortable. They prefer to keep surroundings stable and hope behavior changes anyway. This hope rarely materializes. The environment is not neutral. It is either reinforcing the past or supporting the future. There is no in-between. When people say they are stuck, they usually mean their environment is static. Static environments produce static behavior. Movement requires change. Change requires disruption. This does not mean chaos. It means intentional redesign. It means choosing which loops survive and which are broken. The most powerful environments are those that quietly eliminate old loops and introduce new ones without drama. They do not rely on emotion. They rely on repetition guided by structure. Once new loops are established, behavior feels natural again. This time, aligned with the goal. This is why environment change often feels hard at first but easy later. The difficulty is in breaking the old loop. Once broken, the new loop takes over. People mistake this transition for motivation returning. It is not motivation. It is automation working in a new direction. This is the real mechanism behind consistency. Not force. Not discipline. Not desire. Automation. Environment creates automation. Automation creates identity. Identity sustains behavior. Ignoring this keeps people trapped in cycles they do not consciously choose. Understanding this gives power. Not emotional power. Structural power. It allows people to stop fighting themselves and start shaping the systems that shape them. Until environment is addressed, behavior will continue to feel unpredictable. Motivation will feel unreliable. Progress will feel temporary. Once environment is redesigned, effort fades into the background. Behavior stabilizes. Change sticks. This is not theory. It is how habits actually work. And until this is acknowledged, people will keep blaming themselves for outcomes their environment is producing. Designing environments that force progress. Most people believe change begins with intention. They wait for clarity, motivation, or the right emotional state. This waiting keeps them stuck. Progress does not begin with intention. It begins with preparation. Design is preparation. When the environment is designed intentionally, behavior stops relying on emotion. It stops depending on discipline. It stops waiting for motivation. The environment carries the weight instead. Designing an environment does not mean dramatic change. It means strategic change. It means deciding what behavior should be easy and what behavior should be difficult. Every environment already does this by default. Design simply takes control of that process. The first step in design is honesty. You do not design for who you want to be. You design for who you actually are. You design for moments of fatigue, distraction, stress, and low motivation. Because those moments will come, regardless of plans. Most people design environments for their best days. But habits fail on bad days. Effective environments anticipate failure and prevent it before it happens. This is why design feels counterintuitive. It accepts human weakness instead of fighting it. It does not demand strength. It removes temptation. Design works by shifting effort from execution to setup. Instead of repeatedly forcing action, you create conditions where action happens automatically. This is why progress becomes quiet when environment is correct. There is no struggle. No drama. No internal conflict. Behavior flows because resistance has been removed. People often resist this idea because it feels like cheating. It feels as if success should require effort. But effort is not the goal. Results are. Effort is only necessary when systems are poorly designed. The environment you live in today was designed accidentally. It was shaped by convenience, habit, and past choices. Accidental environments produce accidental results. Intentional environments produce predictable results. Design begins by identifying friction. What behaviors feel difficult to start? What behaviors feel effortless? These feelings are signals. They reveal where the environment is working against you. Once friction is identified, it can be adjusted. Good habits need less friction. Bad habits need more. This is not punishment. It is alignment. Environment design removes the need for constant decision-making. When decisions are removed, consistency increases. Consistency creates momentum. Momentum sustains change. People underestimate how much mental energy is spent deciding. Design reduces decision load. This preserves energy for execution. This is why minimal environments often outperform complex ones. Complexity introduces friction. Simplicity removes it. Design is not about aesthetics. It is about behavior. The goal is not to create a perfect environment. The goal is to create an environment where the desired behavior is the default behavior. Defaults matter because they operate without attention. When the default supports progress, progress feels inevitable. This is the foundation of lasting change. The second layer of environment design is subtraction. Most people think improvement comes from adding more tools, more systems, more rules. In reality, progress accelerates when unnecessary elements are removed. Removal reduces friction instantly. Every object in your environment competes for attention. Attention is finite. When attention is scattered, behavior becomes inconsistent. Design begins by deciding what does not deserve space. This is why the most effective environments appear empty. They are not lacking. They are selective. When distractions are removed, focus does not need to be summoned. It appears naturally. When temptation is hidden, resistance is no longer required. When clutter disappears, clarity emerges without effort. People resist removal because objects feel harmless. A device, a tab, a notification, a shortcut. Each one seems insignificant. But insignificance compounds. Small distractions repeated thousands of times reshape behavior more than dramatic interruptions. Environment design asks a simple question: what behavior does this invite? If an object invites distraction, it belongs somewhere else. If it invites action aligned with your goal, it belongs closer. This principle applies universally. Placement is power. Most environments are designed around comfort. Comfort is optimized. Convenience is prioritized. This design produces predictable outcomes. Ease without intention leads to stagnation. Intentional design reverses this. It makes progress convenient and distraction inconvenient. It changes which behaviors feel natural. This is not about deprivation. It is about direction. Designing an environment means choosing what you want to see when you are tired. When you are distracted. When you are unmotivated. Because those moments define outcomes. People assume they fail because they make bad decisions. In reality, they are making predictable decisions inside poorly designed environments. Change the design, and decisions change automatically. The third element of design is visibility. What is visible gets used. What is invisible gets ignored. This principle explains countless failures. People hide good habits and expose bad ones. Tools for progress are buried. Temptations are displayed. The environment sends the wrong signals. Visibility is not neutral. It is an instruction. When the environment highlights the desired behavior, the brain responds without argument. When the environment hides it, the brain forgets it exists. This is why reminders fail. They attempt to override invisibility with memory. Design removes the need to remember. Effective environments remind you automatically. Design also means creating boundaries. Boundaries are not restrictions. They are clarity. They separate behaviors so they do not compete. When environments mix functions, behavior becomes confused. When spaces have single purposes, behavior stabilizes. This is why workspaces should invite work, not rest. Why rest spaces should invite rest, not distraction. Boundaries reduce friction by removing ambiguity. Ambiguity drains energy. Clarity preserves it. Design does not require perfection. It requires intention. Small changes produce disproportionate results because they shift probability. Probability determines frequency. Frequency determines identity. This is why environment design feels subtle but powerful. It does not rely on force. It relies on structure. Once structure is in place, behavior follows. The final layer of environment design is consistency. Design only works when it is maintained. A single adjustment can produce short-term results, but lasting change requires stable structure. Stability removes the need for constant recalibration. People often redesign environments during moments of inspiration. They clean, organize, rearrange. This produces immediate improvement. But without maintenance, old patterns return. The environment slowly reverts. Behavior follows. This is not failure. It is entropy. Every system decays without reinforcement. Design must be protected. Protecting design means setting rules that do not rely on motivation. It means making decisions once and letting them stand. The fewer decisions you revisit, the more energy you preserve. This is why routines matter. Not as discipline, but as reinforcement. Routines stabilize environments. They prevent drift. Drift is dangerous because it is invisible. Small compromises accumulate. Friction returns. Distractions creep back in. Over time, the environment begins to resemble the old system. People blame themselves when this happens. They assume they lost commitment. In reality, the system lost structure. Consistency in environment design creates predictability. Predictability reduces cognitive load. Reduced cognitive load increases follow-through. This is why well-designed environments feel boring. Boredom is not a problem. Boredom is a sign that conflict has been removed. Conflict is exhausting. Environments that eliminate conflict allow energy to be directed toward execution instead of negotiation. People often seek excitement in change. They want novelty. Novelty feels motivating. But novelty fades. Design endures. Enduring systems are simple. They are easy to maintain. They do not depend on constant adjustment. The most powerful environments are not impressive. They are functional. When environment design is complete, behavior no longer feels like a battle. There is no internal argument. No need for self-talk. No emotional negotiation. Action becomes the default. This is the hidden reason why some people appear consistent for years. They are not constantly recommitting. They are protected by structure. Environment design shifts the burden of change from the mind to the surroundings. The mind becomes free to focus on execution. This is the ultimate benefit. Mental energy is preserved. Decision fatigue disappears. Motivation becomes irrelevant. Change becomes quiet. When environment forces progress, success no longer feels fragile. It feels stable. This is not a temporary transformation. It is a permanent shift in how behavior is produced. Once environments are designed correctly, habits sustain themselves. Identity aligns naturally. Outcomes stabilize. This is the real reason people who redesign their environments do not need constant motivation. They do not rely on willpower. They do not fight themselves. They have removed the fight. Until this happens, effort will always be required. Motivation will always fluctuate. Progress will always feel uncertain. Environment is the invisible hand guiding behavior. Ignore it, and it controls you. Design it, and it works for you. This is not a suggestion. It is a law.